Okay, this is our second interview with Dr. Lee Bird, who is the recently retired Vice President for Student Affairs at Oklahoma State University. My name is Karen Neurohr, and we are at the Oklahoma State University Library. And today is July 6th.
It's August, isn't it?
It's August, yes, of
August
course.
6th. Okay.
Yeah. Clearly, I'm.
See, it looks like you've retired.
On the date.
That's it.
Very well. So we're going to move into a few new areas in our interview. Thank you for coming today.
You're so welcome.
Braving the brutal heat outside.
It is ugly out there.
Okay. Let's start with campus traditions and culture. What stands out to you about OSU's campus traditions and culture?
I think homecoming is probably one of the biggest institutional icons. I've never seen anything like it anywhere I've ever been. So it was pretty amazing. The backside of that, some of the forced pumping and the cost to the houses. I know we're trying to develop an endowment so they don't bear that cost, but the cost, the lost hours of sleep, the anxiousness, some of the alcohol-related incidents. There are a lot of incidents around that, but it's also a very, very fun tradition, not only for our city but for alumni and others. So I hope people will help support so it takes down the cost and the wear and tear on each house. But I think that's probably one of the most iconic traditions, and unfortunately it was made a little bit sad because of the incident a couple of years ago. But I would say that and homecoming, just everything about it, just the parades, the Greek community and residential life, putting out the decks, the house decks. If you've never seen it, never seen pictures of it, you're missing something, because they are outrageous and they're amazing, and the ingenuity of the students that put that together is just, that could be anybody's calling card for marketing or art or anything else, because they are detailed, they're magnificent, and so it's just, I think that's great. Alpha was a long-standing tradition. It's changed into Welcome Week, and there's been some movement. I think, of course, sports, around sports, homecoming and other home games, there's quite a lot of excitement around that. Tailgating, not necessarily my favorite tradition, but there's just a lot of both pride and excitement around the activities of the university. And I think we'll begin to see that for music and for theater and for other areas, which is very exciting. Because I think for those students that, we can all be proud of our athletic teams, we can all be proud of homecoming, but I think it's going to shine the same light on some of the incredible areas of talent beyond athletics and some of the sporting events. So, yeah.
Okay, let's talk about teaching a little bit.
Pancakes. I forgot to mention pancakes. Pancakes, wonderful tradition. Twice a year during finals week, the administration, coaches, faculty, staff come and administrators come to fix pancakes. Thousands of pancakes. I've never liked pancakes, and this has not endeared me to them, making thousands a night. But we run that for 3 or 4 days of finals week, and it is a great way. It's so touching to see their appreciation for us cooking the pancakes. You get 3 at a time, and some students will come back and back. The lines are incredible. It is such a fun phenomenon to see and to experience, and pancakes would be one of my favorite memories, actually, except for the smell of pancakes. Yes.
I was at a small rural community college in Oklahoma before I came here, and they started the pancake tradition there based on OSU's pancake tradition.
Yeah. Well, it's fun. And, other place do steak and eggs. We did that in Minnesota because you needed something a little bit more hearty in the winter. But I think it's just a lovely tradition, and it's a neat way for those that may not see students the same way as I might in my role to come out and just experience that and have fun. So it's very exciting.
Okay, so let's talk about teaching. I know you taught as an adjunct professor in the College of Education and Student Development classes. Probably your entire time here. would you say?
Almost, right?
Mhm.
I've taught several different classes for the College of Ed.
So what classes did you teach?
I taught a kind of an intro to student affairs. I'm trying to think of the names of the courses, which I'll never get right. My favorite was the legal issues in student affairs. I taught that the most. Taught it every year, so I'd have a larger class, so we could do more things within the class. Still a requirement, which I think is awesome, because I hear from students, that something has happened on their campus and they actually knew the answer. So I get, and which is very exciting and very satisfying that they have experienced some of the problems or some things happen, and they will literally call me and say, guess what happened on our campus? Or this, just got one last week from a student, Connor Brady, who said we just had a First Amendment issue on our campus, and I felt like a rock star. So isn't that nice? So whether it's Title IX or OCR requirements or the Americans with Disabilities Act, we don't teach tenure faculty. We don't teach that because really our time is spent on the things that our young student affairs professionals really need to know to protect them, to protect the students, to protect their communities, their academic communities. So the class is very focused on those issues, and it's just a blast to teach.
Will you still teach it?
Oh,
if you're asked?
absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely,
Mhm.
yeah.
Any other classes come to mind?
The student affairs theory class was fun, and I literally cannot remember because I've taught the legal issues class so much more often. But I remember, folks in my class, Vivian Wong, who's now an assistant dean or associate dean for International Studies Office. Denise Weaver actually took one of my courses, and we were able to do some activities. Some of this, and I look not only at them, because that's hopefully your product, but some of the students that are moved on and are now in dean of students positions, and just several of them that I think, golly, that's kind of my thumbprint right there, which is a great honor and very exciting. So I hope I will be able to continue to teach, and that's probably the area that I enjoy the most and write the most in. So that would be my ideal.
Was it an expectation that would be part of your job?
No, that was an add-on,
Mhm.
I think it's important. I think it's important for administrators and practitioners to teach as they can, because I think students get more from the practical experiences of somebody in my role or other roles. I think they get more than you do in just a theory or this is what it looks like. No, these are real life issues, no names involved, but these are real life issues that we face on almost a daily basis. So I think bringing that realism and the practical experience along with theory or research or the ability to research questions is really important.
And certainly, I know you've touched a lot of students through your teaching. How did teaching impact you in your position?
Exhausting, but it's actually, I go home. It takes about an hour and a half or 2 hours, and I usually taught late afternoon or night, and it takes that long to kind of unwind. And I don't mind grading papers. I want to make people better writers. I want to help them, understand everything from sentence construction to kind of building an argument. And I think the things like the assignments and everything else were designed to really create the skill set that I think they're going to need when they enter the profession. So it was very exciting. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's exhausting, when you're working 12-hour days to then go home and prep for a class. But when the class is on or over, it just really felt great. So I love teaching. And the question was, what did I learn? I think you learn every time you teach, and it doesn't matter what you're teaching. Because I learned what the perspective of the generations over the years is about different issues, and how accepting students are in the last 10 years of diversity issues and disability issues, and so the students change, the times change. So I sometimes, that's very exciting, and it's interesting to see through their eyes the perspectives about law or policy or practice through their eyes. And I think I learned because of that.
Let's talk about the profession of student affairs. What professional organizations were you involved with?
NASPA, ACPA as a kind of a younger professional. But I went to OOHRP, which were the housing association when I was working in housing. So probably OOHRP, NASPA, and ACPA were the three organizations that were broad. Well, housing is not as broad, but it is. Those organizations. And then I spent most of my professional time and energy with ASCA, which is the Association of Student Conduct Administrators. Used to be called ASJA, Association of Student Judicial Affairs, and they changed that to reflect really what we did, which is Student Conduct Administration. Fabulous organization. Served as president, served on the board for many, many years, and then finished my presidency and was asked to serve as the president of the foundation board, which I did for several years. And just the connections I've made nationally through that organization, I think changed me, changed my life, changed things that I've been able to do. And that has probably had more impact on me than any other organization.
What stands out to you in terms of that, what you were able to do, the change?
It was interesting. The first year I went, I gave a presentation, which that's one of my fear areas is public speaking. So this is,
That surprises me.
I know. On some level, it's horrifying. But the fear of public speaking, the fear of getting out there and doing stuff. John Blessing, I haven't thought of his name in a long time. He looked at me at the first, and I went and I presented my paper, and it was great, had a great time, and lived, and that's always my fear. But it went well, and I had a great time. And a guy said, "Well, you need to be our state representative for Minnesota." And I thought, well, I don't even, this is my first year, I don't know what's going on. And he said, "Well, yeah, great, you're gonna be wonderful, let's go." And got me involved, and then from there I ran for the board and became a board member. I was a member at large, representative at large for the United States, and then they kind of narrowed it down into federal circuits, and then they narrowed a little bit more. So it was just the amazing people I've met through that organization and the leadership, people that I would later write a book with, people that I would speak with 150 times. That would not have occurred had I not been a part of that association, because that's where we developed the friendship and developed the interests and the research and the desire to do this. So I think my life would be completely different had I not been involved with them. Mm-hmm. So that was the biggest change, and because they were a relatively small beleaguered group at the beginning, these are people that do student conduct and deal with horrible things that happen on campus, and you can kind of sexual violence and discrimination issues, that all the things that they're dealing with, the things that I now teach about. All those issues that surface on campus, and this group, Aaliyah Marriott on our campus, the folks that manage those areas, this is their hub, this is their association. And I maintained the association even though that wasn't, after many years of my life professionally, that was not my primary focus, but I stayed involved because it's an area that I truly love. And just what I got back from the association, especially in those early days, literally changed my life. I think I did teach a couple of classes as a brand new professional, but it just changed my life in terms of building confidence and competence and trust that I had something to give back. So I taught at their Don Gehring Academy for probably 20 years straight. In the summers, a week-long intensive training program. They have a winter conference, so I've been, done a keynote there on the First Amendment and done other presentations, presented almost every year, one or two presentations. So it just really, I think, is the bedrock of everything that came after. So that's where a lot of this started.
So your involvement in the professional organizations was really important to you in your success. Did you have the resources to be able to support your directors that were under you to be able to be similarly involved in the organizations that they needed to be?
Yes,
in?
and we also did a set aside for graduate students to help steer them and give them that exposure and experience, and a way to help launch them into the profession. And so that with ACPA and with NASPA, they will go to the conference or a pre-con, and then they have a chance to do interviews and things to launch themselves professionally. So I think that's really critical. And the directors did that. It was an expectation that they would be involved in their national associations at any level they felt comfortable, given time constraints. I checked with Dr. Halligan before I ran for president, and he was very encouraging, and was surprised that I won, but that was great. But I think it's really important at some level that you are staying current with the literature, that you stay current with the associations, so that you can go to sources and make those kinds of contacts, either within the Big 12, because all of my directors usually meet as a Big 12 group as well. So they know their colleagues, they know where they can get help, but they also know the professional journals, they know the research, they know that body of information, and I think that's really critical for the profession.
Are there particular journals that come to mind that student affairs professionals really should consider key resources or go to?
And again, student affairs is mile wide. So the housing, those folks look to the Journal for OOHRP, and they, the health services folks have different resources. So I can't, and NASPA is an umbrella organization, and I think it's good to have that contact, but that may be better for younger professionals to go explore and experience. They don't generally stay in one area. They, go from housing to another area. So I think all the directors and folks that are interested, they have their hub. They have their accrediting bodies. They have their associations that fit counseling. Counseling can go to NASPA and pick up some good information, but I think the counselors would rather go to the counseling conference and have information, the National Directors Conference, and have information related to what other people are seeing, what they're trying, what they're doing. So there are multiple specializations within student affairs, and all of them have their own associations, all of them have their own conferences, and it was not unusual for my director staff to be involved at the highest levels of those organizations. And it should be a sense of pride for the institution that little sleepy Oklahoma State is represented at the highest levels. That was the approach that President Halligan took as well, to be involved, to be engaged in your profession, and because it also looks good for us. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that is really important. But again, student affairs is a mile wide, so everybody has their own association now.
Now, the residential life one, what do you say?
ACUHO -I. Association of College, I have to read it out. It's College and University Housing Officers, I International. So OOHRP and Career Services has their own, counseling has their own journals and documentation. So while NASPA is very broad and we all get something out of it, I think with specialization, which has come to student affairs, they need to stay probably current on both. And we share a lot of information. That was part of the staff meetings, is talk about conferences or trends or what's happening or what people are doing or what's different. And that, again, educates all of us. So I think that's terribly important.
Let's talk about some of the changes in student behaviors that you have seen over the years. Your dissertation research focused on some predictors of sexually assaultive attitudes and behaviors among American college men, and I took a look at that. How did your research influence you and how you dealt with student behaviors? And what changes in student behaviors have you observed over the years?
Well, recognize that the internet was such a small part of life then, so I think everything has changed because of that. So if I was going to redo my research, that's where I would focus a lot of that. But we're looking at where students live and the environments that we create, and is that in any way, because that's an argument of parents. I don't want my kid living in a co-ed residence hall because it's inherently more dangerous, and that's not what the research showed. So because there's much more, kind of a brotherly, sisterly relationships that develop when people are living together. So that was, I think, one of the findings. The others is that adherence to myths, to rape myths, really do help predict bad behavior. Because if they don't believe that it's rape, because that's such a powerful word, then whatever it is that they did is okay. So that was a predictor. I don't remember my dissertation well. I've slept since then, but it was. Did it inform me? Yes. I was interested in the topic because I helped start a rape crisis center in Yuma, Arizona, 1,000 years ago. And that was just always of interest to me. And then working in housing, having a counseling background, there were many interests that kind of surfaced with that. And Mary Koss had just started writing, and I actually had a chance to work with her a little bit. So that was very exciting and fun. But it would be totally different now, given all the things that are going on. But I still think that rape myth adherence and lack of information about what sexual violence is, both for the perpetrator or for a victim, is still terribly important.
So that has continued to be an important area, topic.
It is. I've just I serve on the group that with Wings of Hope. They have a kind of a community group: police officers, administrators, others, student conduct, prosecutors, city prosecutor, others that come together to talk about issues, specific cases and issues. And I've served on that for 5 or 6 years, and then in fact, I start my time this month, I think, on the board for Wings of Hope, and then also as a SANE volunteer, which is a sexual assault advocate. Go to the hospital and meet with folks if they'd like to have somebody present with them. Mm-hmm. So I've just done that a couple of times this past week. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit, which we'll do throughout this interview today.
That's okay.
As the funding of higher education changed to less state funding, to more reliance on donor funding,
right?
How has that impacted student affairs?
Student affairs is kind of at the bottom of the heap in terms of funding priorities. There have been some exceptions. I think horrible incidents such as Virginia Tech help police departments nationwide on campus. To some degree help student affairs and counseling and boost a little bit. Certainly develop kind of the threat assessment threads that we've talked about previously. So I think if it's between for an institution of our kind, if it's academics for teachers, for faculty, or for research, that same dollar bill, they're going to compete evenly for that, and we probably aren't going to see it. And I've been told that much by provosts and others that, the next dollar bill will never be yours. So, and that's just a reality. Now, we do have a lot of my programs, such as housing, and are fee-based. And the sad reality is, as state funding diminishes, you have to make that up through, as you mentioned, donor gifts, which our president has been amazing at attracting those gifts. So we appreciate that. But it's also going to be fees, and it's also going to be, what students have to pay in tuition. So it's not the delivery of higher education costs less, but who's paying for that has shifted significantly over my tenure. And I think it's very sad because, I paid for school for 3 degrees and never ended up with the kind of expenses that students face now. And that's tragic for them. It's good for them, but it's kind of tragic. But it's just because the cost is so high, and I think the essence of that debate is what is the value of higher education, And I think for whatever reason, the fact that state government doesn't see that value or questions that value or questions the cost, that has diminished us significantly. When you do the research, almost every state that has really high support of higher education also has a booming economy and fewer social ills. So I think, education, I'm a true believer, I'm a true believer in higher education. So, but I think that is lost, especially with bootstrap kind of people, people that haven't gone to college, that are in positions of authority, that don't view it, well, you can do it without college, everybody can. Well, that's not what the reality of the new world we live in with technology and service and everything else that we do. I just don't think that's the reality. I think it's true that a college education is probably more like a high school education 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that it's just as necessary. But that's a hard argument to make with people that have made a living or survived without any college and don't see the value of it, which is sad for higher education, and maybe we just have not told our story well enough, or the overall impact to the state that land-grant universities and others are located in. So I don't think we've told the story well. And I don't think it's as valued as much as it has been, at least in our state, and I think that's tragic.
Right. There have been some campus changes that you influenced or led, and two that come to my mind from where I sit anyway.
Mm-hmm.
One would be the campus safety, and another one would be the First Amendment rights. You talk about the campus changes that you feel like are significant, that you influenced or led.
I would say influence is a better word than led in many cases, because it's awesome directors that see the possibilities from their chair about what needs to be done, and I assist them any way I can. New housing, the wellness department completely. It is an amazing program, and it is, it was going through that change when I started, and then another renovation. And it's amazing what we have on this campus for wellness. Again, housing, the student union, the renovations of the student union, long overdue. Mitch Kilcrease did a great job with that. Todd Miser did a great job with this. Kent Bunker. I look at the directors that have made those changes, and I partner with them. I work with them. I take information to the board. We do a lot, but it's in partnership, and not just in partnership with them, but in partnership with the students. What do we need? What do we want? What do we want this to become? And having them very much part of the process of what we build and create, because it's for them. It's for the whole campus and to some extent the community, but it is for them. So involving the students in helping design and think about what we need to do. And of course, there's national consultants that come in to help with that as well, and help you observe trends and changes. But it's very exciting, some of the changes that have been during my tenure.
So when you talk about national consultants who come in, is that something that that you would initiate from time to time?
In conjunction with the director staff,
Mm-hmm.
To look at some of the needs. We certainly did that with the student union. Visioning exercises, what do we want the union to look like? What needs, what purpose does a student union have? What should it be and what could it be? So it's for housing, what are the current trends? Who's building what? And it's not just an arms race, we're going to build it better and larger, because a lot of institutions are now suffering with those decisions, even in our state. But it's looking at what the needs are and having a sense of where things are going, and the ability to do surveys, interviews, questionnaires of questioning of students to find out what they want and or need in those facilities. So I think they serve in partnership with us to discover the information we need to be able to build, not just for today, but for tomorrow and the next day, because building is expensive.
Mm-hmm. What concerns you most about higher education policy? Let's start with institutional level policy, and then maybe look at state and national.
Um, I'm not sure. I think there are vexing issues out there that policy, good codes, other things can help address, but they're becoming more daunting. Issues on our campus of nationalists, white nationalists coming on our campus and posting their hateful signs that students wake up and see posted on, the doors of the student union or across campus. You can't really write a policy for that. Campuses try, but you can't, for the First Amendment's sake, you can't really do that. So I think, policy has its place. Being smart about policy, I think we're smart on the marijuana issues now. That's a total, huge shift in societal mores. So I think the alcohol, its availability, I think those are all kind of pertinent. No dogs on campus, no smoking. I think those are, or we can have the pet therapy dogs, but I think there have been policies on campus that are rational and pretty smart. But it's hard in the practice and the accountability. It's hard to do that. So I don't think it's necessarily the policies. I think it's really the accountability behind some of the policies. And this is the Wild West on a campus, and I think every campus has this. Faculty or independent contractors, and it's kind of hard to get everybody under the tent and hear the message, get that out. So I think I think the policies are fine. I think there's a lot of ignorance around policies, and that everybody kind of wants to do their own thing at an institution this size, which becomes really vexing if there is a lawsuit or a problem. We have a university policy, but nobody knows where it is or hasn't read it or doesn't believe it applies to them, and they just do their own thing. So I think it's policies are a very complex issue because not everybody gets on the same page, and certainly not at the same time, and others just don't want to be bothered. So I think we have fairly good policies, but I think it's in the education about policies. I know HR and others have gone through and really looked at their policies. We had a process in place. Vice President Weaver and others, a committee, the senior administrative team would look at the policies, whether that was for naming or other things, and we would go through, and one unit was responsible for suggesting changes, recommending changes to policy, and then moving that through the process. And the process would involve all of us reading the policy and deciding whether it made sense and whether the changes would help or hurt, and should they apply only to OSU Stillwater or to our system. So I think that was a very good process, to the extent that you got to read the policies and understand what was changing and why things needed to change. That whole process of looking at policies and procedures was quite amazing, and that's occurred within probably the last 7 or 8 years. So I think that's been good.
That's an ongoing thing, truly, right?
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
It never
has
ends.
to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's ongoing.
What are your thoughts about the common notions of competition between academic affairs and student affairs?
About the competition, it's usually for resources. I think we do have a lot in common, and I would say that I think in part because of my tenure on campus and getting to know so many deans pretty well, that those midnight calls, I'm really worried about this, I don't know what to do. And again, we set up some structure to help with that. But I think just those close working relationships with deans and advisors and the willingness for my staff to go out and do training. The counseling staff would go out and do training about what are we seeing. They would do training for faculty, staff, and students about suicide and suicide prevention. We're in this together. So the more they have their role and we have ours, but the more we can collaborate and the more awareness we can create. And this is always a stumbling block about our programs and services. And that was kind of a constant rub when you're doing marketing. Sometimes you're doing marketing to students who want to come to the institution instead of marketing to our current students the services that are available to them. And that I can say was kind of my Achilles heel. Because we need to spend, there's students that graduate never knowing we had a health services on campus. I'm not sure how. You have counseling. I wish I'd known about that. So, making sure that we're promoting to the students we are serving the great resources that they have available to them, in some cases 24 hours a day, can help alleviate that stress, increase enrollment, increase retention, increase satisfaction, and yet we're constantly trying to fight to get some of that done. In a similar vein, educating faculty and staff more broadly about the issues that they're likely to encounter with contemporary students was also part of our mission. And I think that was helpful too. So it has to be a partnership to really be effective, but we did need a whole lot more help in promotion and advertising than we had.
Did that change over the years?
It got a little bit better. We started to use, I think, social media to our advantage a little bit better. I am OK State, some of the initiatives of making sure students know where to go to get that information. But again, sometimes it didn't have the polish because we just couldn't afford it, and we're at the tail end of some of the marketing priorities. So that made it very hard because I wanted students to know what they had and what they could use. And in little chunks with IMO at K-State or what they do in housing to help make students more aware of resources, there are paths to that information, but it was never, in my opinion, a beautifully coordinated event because we never really had the resources to do that well.
So the different colleges have their own marketing and communications teams. Did you have anything like that, or did yours
it depends on
go through the
It depends on who you ask for.
Oh, okay.
Because some even departments like Union, they're responsible for doing multiple activities. They have kind of a marketing entity. I was told that the desire was to move everybody, all marketing, into one big camp. But depending on which college you were or what area, that either occurred or it didn't occur. So that was not universal. And we lost some of our, I think, really talented folks to other entities because of that. So, and we had some people that were very talented in those areas and much needed. So they were swept up where other departments and colleges and others were allowed to keep theirs. So we still had access to them, we still could use them, but I think it was very uneven. In my opinion, it was very uneven, and it was not policy. It was just, we want her, or we need this, or we want that, so we're going to take it. So that was very uneven. And everybody has their own product and services. Engineering is different than literature. We have different needs and communication needs. So I think business may be different than engineering, so they need to have their own person or feel like they do. So it's really hard to corral and coordinate some of that. And I think that some of the efforts to do that were very uneven.
So would you call it sort of a silo mentality in a way?
I think that always exists in higher education to some degree because, much like student affairs, we are unique entities, but we're also a division. The colleges feel much the same way. We are special and different, and so our needs are special and different, and we have to have our own people because no one else could understand what we do. And to some degree, they're probably right. And to some degree, they're probably absolutely wrong. So I think it just is what people feel like they need to be able to do the job that they want to do. But that's, that being true, I think that's also based on what resources you have allocated to you. And we never quite had all the resources that we needed, so we shared a lot. And we cooperated with each other a lot, so that was a good thing.
In our first interview, you reflected on some of the presidents that you served under and their leadership. President Halligan, I think, stood out a lot. He was the first president that you served under, and
Correct.
some of the issues
Correct.
that came up, tragic issues, in fact,
Yes.
during that time period. When you think of the President Schmidley, I think you mentioned his efforts toward increasing campus diversity.
Yes.
And some of his strategic planning efforts, and President Hargis for wellness initiatives.
And I think fundraising also for President Hargis did a remarkable job with that.
Does anything else stand out to you when you think of those three presidents?
I did want to mention that I think that just had somebody come into town that I hadn't seen in 40 years, and had a chance to kind of showcase what I did here and the beautiful campus and what's changed, and the emphasis on structural continuity, which is, well beyond these three individuals, but to preserve that continuity and to preserve the beauty of this campus and to really look at our growth and what we're doing. I think President Hargis deserves an incredible amount of credit, whether it's cigarette butts or around campus or trashy areas. That's just been gone, and the staff and physical plant that do our landscaping are awesome. So I just think the beauty of this campus and preserving that and planning for that going forward, President Hargis that's a huge initiative for him, and it shows in everything he does and how he kind of envisions the campus. And I think that's made all of us more aware and conscientious of, do you throw this away, or do you recycle, or do you, how do we preserve this beautiful campus that we have and maintain it? And in China, some of the institutions aren't that old, and because of the air pollution and other things, they're pretty trashed in some cases. Some of them are absolutely beautiful, but kind of trashed. And it just, when they're done, they just build a new one. And we've really, for an institution our age, it is just a beautiful physical plant. That's everybody that picks up trash. That's everybody that cleans the floors. That's everybody. And I think Hargis deserves a lot of credit for the campus beauty, and I think people recognize that for him. But I think that's really awesome. Schmidley, Dr. Schmidley was, I think, more known for probably the athletics and tearing down old houses or buying houses and that whole process, which was gave me a rash. Just the town hall meetings talking about the need or desire to do this, and I was on the periphery of that, but it certainly made me very anxious. Does it look like it's turned out to be a good thing? Yes. It's prettier than some of the slum housing that we had around the campus, but at a high cost, I think, to this community and relationships and other things with those homes that were still owned by families. So it's kind of it was a tough time, but I think his legacy is probably more in the athletic realm and the athletic village than anything else.
So that sort of brings up the question about town and gown relationships. And what do you see in Stillwater in terms of that?
I think overall it's awesome. I will give you one example that I think just says it all. The woman who was turning 100 was very ill. Word got out that she lived here in Stillwater. Word got out that this is what she wished she had before she died. And it was 3,000 people on the streets of Main Street, a ton from the university, a ton from businesses. You don't do the floats, but we had a lot of noise, a lot of excitement, and she was riding in a car in the back waving. If you can do that in 24 hours, that's the kind of spirit that exists here. And it has moved me from the very first semester I was here, in part because of the plane crash. But it is constantly stunning to me, and it is the best town-gown relationship I've ever seen. And that's 5-6 institutions. And I think it's because so many of our faculty live in the area, help out, try to solve problems. The food bank or Wings of Hope, or that they're involved at levels to try to really make a difference in this community. And push comes to shove, this is exactly the community you want to be in. If things are going to get bad, I would rather be here than anywhere else in the world, just because the nature of the relationships, not just town gown, but just the community, and the university is clearly a part of that rather than its own ivory tower or a separate entity. We're kind of in the middle of town. We've set up the transportation for the city. We've done other things, but it's the attitude, I think, is very positive, and a lot of investment both ways, talent, time, treasures, both ways to this community, and I've never seen it better. I think it's great.
When you think about the provosts, vice presidents for academic affairs that you have served with over the years, Marlene Straith, Bob Sternberg, Pamela Fry, Gary Sandifer, what stands out to you about any of those particular people?
I was trying to remember he was the provost when I was hired, and I'll be darned if I can think of his name, but I'm going to get there. I talked to him about 6 months ago when he was trying to get somebody over to his house for the day of caring, where they go out and they do yard work. He needed somebody desperately to come out and work in his garden. He was the provost or academic vice president when I came, and we had a very, very, very strong relationship, and I'm just spacing on his name, and I apologize. I'm going to have to look it up because it's making me crazy.
We can add that later.
Just an amazing, kind man. Got student affairs, and I think all of them have had some sensitivity to student affairs because they're all experienced professionally in these areas. Marlene with the flooding and fires in her I think it was North Dakota. Experiences that she's had, and I think she got it. Dr. Sternberg was kind of fun to work with. He wasn't here that long, a little bit of an odd duck, but still fun. And then there was Wyoming. I still have friends that call me about that. And then I think Dr. Sandifer is a classic. He is kind, he is gentle, he is smart, very caring human being, and I thoroughly enjoyed working with him before I retired. Just really good guy. And he, we've talked about money and needs and everything else, and occasionally we're at loggerheads about those sharing of resources or using the resources, but he gets it, and I think he gets it because of his background, his academic credentials, and he understands some of the challenges that we face, and I think was always very sensitive to that, and he's a lot of fun. And I've known several people that have worked in the office, and what a difference a personality makes. Just how gracious Dr. Sandifer is to everyone that comes in, and does have, I think, a kind of a wicked sense of humor. I don't know if I mentioned last time going to the budget meeting and him throwing down the book and saying, "I want all the money," and he was just screwing with us, just kind of. But it was a budget hearing, pre-budget allocation, and came in and threw his stuff down and said, "I demand all the money," and that's so out of character for him. It was just funny. Everybody laughed, but he is kind and gracious, and he says hello to everybody. He takes the time to say hello to everybody, and how are you doing? And truly believe he means it when he asks that. That is, to me, that is incredibly significant. And I think others that Sternberg was kind of a character, and I think it was about serving him. And I think for folks like Dr. Sandifer, it's serving others. And that is it means a lot to me personally. And we just had fun. I would have to go downstairs and tell them that something horrible has happened on campus or this incident has occurred and inform him. Never got a rise out of him. We never, he's just even Stephen, very, very good temper. He could be in student affairs, just a very even temperament and charming personality and very warm and caring. And I think for those key roles, that's what this institution needs. And so we did great by getting him here.
Okay, there were all of these functional areas that you oversaw. So when you think about some of the longtime campus leaders of the different functional areas, who stands out and why? And we could go through them one by one if you want to, or if you want to just wing it, that's fine too.
Boy, it's a hard call. I work with two generations. I hired all of the new people, and worked with the older folks. I shouldn't say that. They're saying that about me. But hired, came in with that staff, and all of them, but one retired, and then. Yeah, I think that's accurate. All but one retired, and then had the opportunity to be involved in hiring the new ones. And I think the new folks are spectacular. The old ones, you're always, the people that you work with. Tom Keyes, that had the union before Mitch. Mitch was interested in this position because of Tom Keyes. Susie Burks was interested in this position because of a gentleman just passed away about 5 or 6 years ago, served as interim VP for a year, Pat. Need to get the name. He was director of counseling, and so that was kind of, bringing up somebody from your own program, and Susie Burks was hired replacing him. So there is that change. Chris Barlow is the center for our health services program. I never thought we would replace Steve Rogers. I mourned his loss because he's just such a wonderful man. Steve Rogers, who is our director of health services, when he announced his retirement, it just ate my soul because I so enjoyed working with him. Again, very funny, very subdued, but a very funny guy, and very kind and very thoughtful and business oriented. And we've hired someone that has that vision, those skills, and is very funny, very, humor means a lot to me, I think. I say that word a lot, but I really do look at that, the warmth and the kindness and the sensitivity and the 2 a.m. calls and just a sense of humor about who you are and what you do. Those things I value. And, he's calling me at 3 a.m. telling me bad news about something, and I do the same thing to him. And I think, we can't all be replaced. And sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, but I was very lucky to hire people into those positions that were phenomenal and have given their all here. So I'm really proud of the people I hired, proud of the people who attracted me here. So,
is the continuity that we had here with the former people that were directors, is that typical in a university of this size? What do you think?
I think we're pretty lucky in that the continuity, I think, remained a little bit higher than I've seen other places. And it'd be interesting to see the transition time, from job to job for folks in the Big 12. I think for institutions where they're, especially Big 12 for some reason, seems to be fairly high continuity. But the folks that I went to my first Big 12 meeting, they're all gone. So that's completely different. And some of them actually through retirement, but mostly not. So there's that. I think this is another kind of the hallmark of this university is people come here and stay here. And you're lucky when they're good people, that they want to stay here and you want to keep them here. So we have been pretty lucky in student affairs not to have a great deal of turnover. Mm-hmm. Some at the bottom levels, and you would anticipate that. Housing directors or RAs and housing directors, they're here to get their degree and move on for the most part. So that kind of transition. Dining is constantly changing. That there are some areas that are just seem to be in flux all the time. Other areas we had great continuity, campus life, student union. But yeah, most of them were replaced during my time as VP here.
You've worked with a lot of student leaders over the years here at OSU. When you look back at that, you mentioned Vivian Wayne several times.
But she was really not a campus leader, but in her role for what she did, she was one of my students, and we've stayed in contact and certainly had some wild adventures together. But let me finish the question.
What other student leaders stand out to you?
Oh my goodness. I had a really good relationship with all the presidents, student body presidents, and from the first year, there was one that was kind of always under impeachment threats from everybody else, and we never really developed a great relationship. But that's one out of 19. That's unheard of on most campuses. We attract the kind, I think, of earnest students that really do understand that it's a service role when they're in a leadership role, and they got that. And through the good times and the bad times and some of the crises that we've had on campus, how can we help? What do you need us to do? Again, pretty amazing. Some of the stresses and strains around, the state and, with their student leaders and kind of running amok. And I'm just so blessed that for the vast majority of leadership positions on this campus, SGA and GPSGA and other entities, they were great. And leaders in not necessarily the traditional role of, SGA president. Sometimes it was leadership in other ways. What can we do about it? Met with Holland Gray, a student who graduated from this institution who's, currently looking for work, and we just got together and had breakfast and a nice chat. He started, to a large extent, kind of the emphasis on suicide prevention. He came through SGA, worked in SGA, I think was Senate chair for SGA, but went out and did the hard work to try to get things developed for the student body in this regard and get people on board. Did a great job. I hope he is remembered for that because he did a terrific job. Terrific. Matt Beyer, who wanted to bring community emergency resource training to OSU. And so we started teaching those courses not only for his fraternity, SIGEP, for his fraternity, but we did it for RAs, we did it for other folks. Chris Parker, who's now a professor at Dr. Chris Parker, who is at Penn State, professor of economics. Went from OSU to the London School of Business for his master's and doctorate, and is now teaching at Penn State. Some of the students, Kyle Jones, won the Pickering Award. Kyle Inslee, who was on, American Idol or something. But tremendous leaders, went on to Harvard, won the Pickering scholarships. Very active in our office. We were active with them. Kyle Jones also taught with us at the CERT training in Chris Parker. So that's why I remember that little huddle of guys. Just a whole line of amazing student leaders. You look at our top 10 winners, and I take getting that program elevated as one of my successes, by the way. What we now seniors. Mm-hmm. It was a horrible, horrible program, and I've seen a very good one. And I said, we really need to upscale this a little bit and not just meet in the lounge and drink a little Kool-Aid. We need to upscale this, and they did, and it's now I think a much bigger deal and really a good deal. You look at those students; they've been student leaders. They've also been volunteers. They've been good, solid academically. We just really have phenomenal students here, and that's again, that's why I stayed. But presidents, RHA, some of the RHA leadership, that doesn't get as much focus as SGA, but critically important to the life and of those students in the residence halls. The colleges have leadership positions, GPSGA. Wonderful group of students trying to make the graduate student journey better for our campus. So I have been blessed with really just amazing students to work with. I will never remember their names, but I will remember the relationships and what we worked on. So that's, yeah. Many more amazing leaders on our campus. Sometimes leaders that are not going to get the glory, that were just amazing. And I look at many of the top 10 seniors, and I look at just some of the SGA and GPA. All of those students were just phenomenal.
Do you see them maintaining their ties to OSU?
Yes, I do. I do. And Matt Beyer just got married and is going back to med school. He's been a VP for Sterling Bank of London in Manhattan, and he flew in and we talked and had coffee, and he said, "This is what I want to do. Am I nuts?" And I said, "No," because I saw that passion in him when he was teaching CERT classes. So again, to have that history, and I'll know their kids, and I'll know their, that's a huge part of the blessing that was OSU for me.
Mm-hmm. You faced some significant experiences and issues over the tragedies over the years here, beginning with the plane crash in 2001, then the 2011 plane crash, the homecoming parade tragedy in 2015. Talk to me a little bit about what that was like, having to face those in the position that you were in.
I wrote in something that I wrote that this was an extraordinary way to get to know my staff and to see the community. Everybody's happy, and when you see people in stress and people under these circumstances, I think you get a real sense of who they are. And so my love of OSU grew exponentially through that first crisis, because the lengths that people went to never make a phone call, for it to have people call you and say, "Hey, where do you need me? What do you want me to do? How can I help? What do you need? Oh, by the way, I bought 50 rolls of black and orange ribbon on my way back from Dallas." It's amazing. We had another VP there that I recognized was in our provost role too, because it was his wife who worked in student conduct that picked up on her way back, went to every store and bought them out of orange and black ribbons, and made those ribbons for 14,000 people with campus leaders. A lot of Greek leaders came together and just did those in 2 nights to be able to wear that day. Pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. How can we help? There were people that did parking lots that never got to see the memorial because they were sitting in the parking lots helping people get parked. People that helped drive, people that served those meals, that opened up the food service. No, not a cashier, just food service. So there was comfort food available for people that were just kind of milling around and wondering what was going on. So you see just amazing acts of thoughtfulness and kindness that unfortunately surround disasters and crises. And I think you kind of see the best of people in a good community. You see the best of people. And I think that came loud, that came through. That this is a very, it's a seasoned group. They know the resources. They're willing to do what's necessary and go above and beyond that call every day. And that was really obvious to me through that experience. And just the pride that I had in those individuals just grew exponentially through that experience. Would I have appreciated them had we not had that experience? Yeah. But it changes you. When you go through a crisis with someone, it does change you. And hopefully for the better, but it changes how you view them. And that was something quite remarkable with those experiences, is it's go, 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 go. Make a difference. See what you need to do. What can I do to help? How can I, what do you need? How can we help? What do you need? That's just all the time. And I don't think that happens everywhere. I just don't. Now, I've never seen this many kind of major crises either, but I even called a piece that I wrote about collateral beauty, was the name of the article. And it was in a book it came out for NASPA, National Association of Student Personnel Administrators, that I wrote for that. I called the article, or the chapter, Collateral Beauty, because it is, again, for me, it's not just these horrible incidents that occur. It is the compassion and care of communities that come together to support individuals to get through it. And that is what is stunning and awe-provoking for me. The hospital tearing up all the bills for people that were on pre-Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving, tearing up all the bills from the homecoming tragedy. Nobody paid a dime to the hospital. Raising well over $100,000 to go back to the families, again, Hospital Foundation, and working on that board to see that happen. And they didn't keep a dime. That was all collected, Stillwater Strong, that was all collected and then distributed based on some of the expenses that they would face and recurring issues or death. I don't see that in a lot of communities. And whether it's the parade and just a joyous event where everybody kind of rolls out to make somebody's day, or the tragedies, I just don't see that everywhere. And I think that makes Stillwater an incredibly special place to be. So I don't know if that answered the question, but it is through those disasters you certainly get a sense of who your staff are and who kind of their motivation. And again, nobody said, "Well, I'm too tired to do this again tonight. I couldn't possibly work on set." Everybody worked. Everybody was there, and everybody did what they could to make those situations better on campus. And so, again, nothing but compliments.
What were some tough decisions that you had to make that you could share?
Closing a fraternity was difficult and very political, but also very difficult because it's hard to close an establishment that's existed year after year, but at a certain point where an environment becomes just dangerous, you have to do something. And I think that's an expectation and a moral obligation to kind of protect other students from that. Student conduct has, not only here, but there's a lot of things with student conduct. If you have to remove somebody or have them step out for a period of time, suspension or expulsion, that's very difficult work. Kudos to Aaliyah Marriott, who does it very well, and her staff. Those are tough decisions. The drug, Pride Point, stuff with drug and alcohol, we were one of the first institutions that adopted a drug court model for our campus. And it kind of petered out for a while because of finances, and then with interest from the president, renewed our funding for that so we could sustain that. So I think things around suicide, the hard things that occur, the violence issues, other things that happen, and then probably student conduct in Greek community are tough decisions to make. Letting staff go, is also hard. Rarely occurred, but it's hard. So I think there's just always ups and downs associated with the VP role.
Were there any significant changes that you attempted that really didn't quite work out like you planned?
Yeah.
Can you talk about any of those?
Oh, sure. I don't mind. I think, I think if you don't try, some things take wings, some things don't. Some things, start strong and then kind of peter out. And one of the programs that never took wing was a program that I wanted to start based on my experience with E-Angels, which is Tony Stone in our community. There is a list of individuals that are on a email. I don't know if you know
I
of
haven't heard of
E-Angels.
this. No.
It's great. And again, if you want to love Stillwater, you look at this kind of program and you go, yeah. So she works with all of the counselors and folks in schools, K-12 system, and will identify through those counselors needs for students. So a student doesn't have a coat. Students don't have shoes. They're wearing their sister's shoes or sparkly. They're wearing things that are sometimes embarrassing for that student. They don't have underwear. They don't have, they don't, just something. They don't pants. It's oftentimes around clothing or supplies. And it comes to the attention of a counselor or the network of teachers that Tony has. So we're called the Angels, and there's a phenomenal list of humans out there around our community. And so they'll say this is an E-Angel need, and it sends out like an alert. And Tony says, this is the need. We have a 12-year-old boy going to the school that needs pants. Wearing shorts in December that has no long jeans, whatever it is. And it could be this big. So it comes out and we kind of bid for it, the person who gets to it fastest. And if it pulls on their heartstrings, they do it. And so it's a great program. I love it. I love it. I love it. And sometimes there's a little, nah, because somebody got the one you wanted. And I will tell you from experience that if you take one, it's usually not just the 2 pair of jeans that they need, but then you buy shoes and underwear and 3 t-shirts and 2 shirts and a sweatshirt, a coat, and because we want to be in a position to help people. And the kid never knows who does this. It is put in a sack, it is delivered to the counselor, and it is delivered to the kid. And there is nothing, it's just done. Mm-hmm. There's no thank you notes, there's nothing. And when you find one that you want, you do it. And you got to be fast, because there's a lot of people who want to help, so you got to be fast. So I wanted to set up a program kind of based on the E-Angel notion, using the spare time of students to do things that some of our elderly disabled veterans couldn't do. And I wanted to model it after that program that we set up, a kind of a website that students who want to do volunteer work, but they can't go to the Humane Society every Tuesday. They can't commit to an eternity, but they could do this. Mm-hmm. And so the notion was to set up, much like E-Angel, set up like a little hit list of needs for our community, for really with those groups in mind, not just because you don't want to pay for to have your lawn mowed, but because you have a need. And we work with churches and other social service agencies to say, we're going to start this and see how it goes. And I don't know whether, I think conceptually it was strong. In practice, because we have no marketing, we don't have those people, you can't get a hold of everybody, I don't think it really caught on. But that was something that kind of never took off, because we didn't really have the marketing tools to do a good job of it. Mm-hmm. And everything that we start, there's no extra personnel to do it. So it's are you willing to take on another thing and get it rolling? And then people aren't as trusting, I think, in some ways, that do you want a stranger coming over, and liability issues, and what if they steal something when they're mowing? It becomes very complicated, and I think we overcomplicate some things and lose out on some of the resources, the incredible energy and talents and time of our students. And I think the value of volunteerism, you don't just have to drink in our community, there are other things to do. And when people get involved in things that touch their hearts, I think we change lives. And not only is the person who you're helping changed, but the person who does that help. And they see their value, and that their little bit of energy, their time, their talent can make a huge difference in somebody's life. When you recognize that early on, oh my gosh, what a difference you can make. So I think that was a program that kind of was really just abandoned because we couldn't get the marketing and people to do it. But I think it would have been a great program. Hey, things happen. You do what you can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about women in higher education administration. Or even more into the profession of student affairs. What are some of the top issues that you see that women face that are in these administrative leadership positions?
Again, I think that depends on the administration that you're working for and the expectations and the staffing and resources that are provided. There's so many different variables in that. I was working with the American Council on Education 35, 40 years ago in Minnesota. 30 years ago in Minnesota, trying to identify women presidents. And, we have more than we used to, but we don't have what we should have proportionally. So it's, they were even looking at how do we start building those senior leadership roles for women and for others. And I think that's still a vexing problem. I really do. Because we don't have enough women in those roles, then the issues of balance, family, just the unbelievable hours and crises and just a lot of things that come with the territory that I think are a little bit daunting unless you have the resources or the partner or the spouse to share that burden. It's very difficult because and that's true of I think many areas within student affairs, not just the VP role, but directors and assistant directors that are going to get those midnight calls, or they're dealing with their family, and yet I call them and say we have a problem, we've had a suicide or an attempted suicide or something's happened, and they have to respond. That's very difficult. And I think you have a passion for it, you stick with it, or you don't require as much balance. I mean, let's be honest. Or, and I want to be family friendly. I want to be family supportive. But we still have stuff that happens after 5 p.m. and before 8 in the morning. And student affairs is just rife with that.
So a lot of sacrifices have to be made.
I think so. And lack of sleep and stress and other things that go with that. Yeah. But if you love it, I mean, if it's your passion, I sometimes don't get why people do the jobs that they do. But if you really love it, and it's your passion, you find the energy for it. You don't mind some of the sacrifice because it's coming to a great end, and you have the opportunity to do amazing things every day, to change a kid's life. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Without mentioning any names or institutions, can you share information about women in administrative positions in higher education and significant challenges that you are aware of that they faced?
I think I don't want to speak for all women, I certainly can't speak for all institutions. I think there's several variables: how you conduct yourself, the president that you're serving under, and kind of your time and energy and interest. I think this role, like many administrative roles, can be very isolating. There's not many people we can talk to about kind of what's going on at work today. Much of it is confidential. Much of it is just damn depressing. There's something going on. Some of it is threatening. Some of it is there's just a lot. And but I think conscientious presidents, like any conscientious supervisor, recognizes the stresses and strains and makes sure that there is a sense of inclusion or checking in or checking with you. I think that can make a huge difference. So what you do interpersonally in your network, and then what a supervisor does. I think I mentioned that Dr. Halligan was just always sent a note, a personal note, and he knew it was a personal note, and took the time to call and say thank you for something. acknowledge good deeds or whatever. That is incredibly motivating. Because you're making sacrifices, that you're getting old before your time or whatever, that, you're getting gray, but you're doing that and it means something and it's noticed. And I think for those, for a lot of us, that made a huge difference. And so other presidents who just work to make sure it's very inclusive, and that's easier with a little bit smaller institution. It's easier with less staff, with less complexity. I mean, this institution wasn't that complex when I came. You think of the number of VP positions that have been created, or assistant VP or deans or whatever. It's a much more complex institution than in 2000 when I started. So that was a very much more intimate group, very smaller group, lots of communication. Dr. Keener was our provost, and I'm still going to get the other one. So it was a smaller groups, easier to kind of communicate with each other. We could fit into a small office pretty easily, and we talked all the time. And so I think it's very different. The more complexity that you build in, that can create isolation. It can create a lot of different challenges that VPs and others, administrators, face. And I don't know, because we don't really talk about it, I don't know what, other than everybody wants money from Joe Weaver, I don't know his, how he feels about stuff, because we generally don't have a chance to talk to him about it. But at a smaller institution where we're it's a little bit easier to get us together and we meet more regularly, that's kind of a conversation that occurs much more naturally and regularly. So I think isolation and how you're supervised makes a huge difference.
You mentioned how you conduct yourself as one of the variables or factors. So what do you mean by that?
I mean, what your personal need is for strokes, or for, if you don't have a high need for that and you can just put your head down and go 90 miles an hour, and some people need more, attention, communication, constant. It just doesn't occur, especially with complex institutions. I'm sure it does someplace. Here it got a little bit fuzzy, or a little bit less. So the meetings become more irregular, and you don't see your boss, or you don't talk to your boss every day or for months at a time. That's kind of the norm. But if you're one that needs constant reassurance or attention, you probably aren't going to get it in these roles. You just aren't. We were hired to do a job. You have kind of some general guidelines. We have university policies, but this is your job. But we have the freedom, which I love here, to create the environments and the trust to let you do what you feel like you need to do. And that's really the blessing. So folks that can operate in those environments are going to do great. And I think those that need, I don't know how to define it.
Affirmation.
Affirmation, constant, and it's nice to get that occasionally. I think Halligan did that very well, and others in my past have done that well. But if you really need that all the time, you just aren't going to get it. And that's true here. It's true of other places. So you have to be able to work pretty independently. You have to have some confidence that you know what you're about, your values, you know what you believe in. My value system has not wavered professionally since I started, and I'm pretty confident in that. And so I don't have to think really hard about the right thing to do. I have a sense of what that is a lot. So if you need reassurance or to confirm that or to talk to somebody about it, you just aren't going to get that in this role. So it can be a little bit isolating. Those really stressful things, the threats, the horrible things that are going on, you need to talk to a professional therapist. You need to be able to, share some of that. But I think, I just think it can, how you conduct yourself and what you need to be happy, that does weigh in to this mix, I think.
Okay, let's bounce over back to community service. You've touched on a few of the different ways that you have been involved in community service here at Stillwater, boards you've served on. So the hospital board,
Mhm.
you were on the board
Right,
for the Stillwater Medical Center.
right.
Mm-hmm.
That was fun. And Scott Petty, who used to be at the foundation board, took that over, so served with him as well. And a lot of fun on that board. Neat people, very diverse community members, bankers, and Mackenzie Wolfong served on the board. So very diverse people who still I retain as friends and see, in the community. Just started Wings of Hope, but I work with them on different things. I work with Red Cross forever, over 4 decades, but I do odds and ends for them. In fact, doing some training later this month to become an IT and instructor trainer so I can teach classes for Red Cross. So just different stuff. And I've always found I think it's so important to invest in your community and to be a part of it beyond your job if you can. Some people can't. I mean, I had the luxury of doing that, but it's really you get so much out of it and great friendships and see what good the community can do. And so yeah, that's I'm trying to think of other things I've been involved in over the time, but those have probably been the most significant ones.
The dog park.
Dog park. Every VP should have to start a dog park. Yeah, another unfunded mandate was the dog park. So, yeah. So we run that. Thankfully, Shauna and before her, Kathy, were warriors for the dog park. No staff. No. We painted it. Helped get the fencing in and watered and cut the grass, and we did that because there was no money and no funds, but yet it was a mandate to get it done. So we got it done. Rotary helped with that. That was fun to get it started. We're still looking for grass. I remember a scene in one of the movies. It's just a very funny movie, but they just had a lawn put in and now they can't pay for it, so they're taking it out. So he goes out and steals a little bit of grass from everybody in the community and starts to piece together his lawn again. That's what I feel like the dog park will eventually succumb to get enough grass. But yeah, there's been a lot of different things, and I think to the extent that you can do that, and again, that's a balancing act. I had the freedom to do that. Some people don't. It's I don't mind being on call. I'm on call for work anyway, so I don't mind being on call for other groups or entities because I'm on call anyway. I'm used to having a phone with me. But some people can't do that. And they've got kids and they've got, they got to take care of that and they go over the schoolwork and go, they don't have that freedom. I had that freedom. So, and it's been a huge part of my life and I really enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. In 2007 and again in 2015, OSU received recognition from the Carnegie Classification for Community Engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And tell me about your involvement with the application and with that distinction.
It was a nightmare. I can just honestly say that. Kathy in our office and I decided that this would be a good thing for the institution.
So you brought it.
So we brought it to the yes.
Okay.
We did the initial application and that was the first time it was available.
Mm-hmm.
And the application was, I'm sure they had so many diverse. We're just lucky to be in the first pool, maybe, because collecting information on this campus in a systematic way. First, people don't track it because it dealt with engagement and with the community. People don't track anything. They just do it. They don't track it. It required so much information and a report. And Catherine Gage took that over in the second round, and God bless her for that because she did a masterful job trying to get the information. And again, doing that process, we've did it initially, which is great, and then re-upped it, which was great, thanks to Catherine. Our office ended up having to do it again, and then we beg to get some of this, institutionalize some of this. Why is Student Affairs putting it together? It deals mostly with faculty stuff. Why are we doing it? But it was important, I think, to have that recognition for the institution. So we tried to pull these pieces together and get it going. I hope that changes in the future, that we have a more systematic way of looking at what our institution does, and that it's more intentional. Part of it was faculty engagement, community engagement. So doing classes that were, practical experiences in the community and classroom teaching. Collecting that information is a nightmare on this campus because nobody thinks to collect it. So when we ask the deans, can you tell us in these 17 categories the things that you're engaged in? No, and nobody could. There's probably one person hiding in a corner doing most of the work, but unless you can shine a light on that person and they're willing to come forward, you don't get it. So it was a nightmare putting those together, but I'm glad we did, and I'm glad we struggled through that. And again, God bless Catherine Gage, Dr. Gage, for doing that.
Has there been anything else similar to that you have?
The dog park. I just had to, yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure, trying to get information out, and communication in a complex organization is tough. And I think everybody who's worked in a complex organization knows that. Any initiative you want to do, how are you going to reach everybody with one communication? And the answer is you won't. Because some people won't read it, some people, don't care. It's really, so communication and identifying things, that's a challenge for everybody in a complex organization. So I don't think we're unique. I just think it's when you try to put together information like that, mm-hmm. It's a nightmare to try to pull details out, pull information out.
Okay, so now that you're retired, You've mentioned several times doing some writing. You've been asked to contribute to chapters, different writing. Yep. So tell me a little bit about that.
I wrote the one I was writing. I actually started it when I was still working and then just finished it, was that Collateral Beauty chapter about kind of some of the crises mm-hmm. at the university. I just finished a chapter for ASCA they did a book 10 years ago, and some of my colleagues and I wrote a chapter on First Amendment rights of students, and we rewrote that completely, and frankly it's much better, I think, but rewrote that and submitted that a couple of weeks ago, did the final run through. I did a book in 2006 on the First Amendment and for university administrators, and have done a ton of things because of that book and because the association allowed us to do that book. So that we've been asked to do another book, mm-hmm. and so I'll get started on that pretty quick here. Working with Mackenzie Wilfong, who used to be an attorney here, and some colleagues, and looking at First Amendment crises, Charlottesville, how campuses respond, police departments. There's so many examples of just horrible things that are going on across the country. Higher education is kind of unique in that mix in some ways and not in others. So it's telling those stories of those campuses where we've had major incidents and informing faculty, staff, and others, administrators, about how to deal with First Amendment issues on campus. And why are they issues? And most people don't understand the First Amendment anyway. And so this is an area that I'm very passionate about, and so that's what the book will be. But we're going to include some of the stories of the campus incidents, California, Berkeley, Charlottesville, Virginia, and kind of look at some of the incidents and have some of those contributors to the book be people that have lived it on their campus and what they've learned, because I think it's important to share some of those horrible things that may give you insight, or, well, what do we need to do to plan for this, or what could happen? Well, here's what could happen, and what are you going to do about it? And because it is the First Amendment and it's constitutional law, I think it's also not trampling on the First Amendment, but really dealing with the issues in a much different way for campuses, and that's something that we've applied here and that we're going to be sharing.
What other retirement activities are you?
Pickleball.
Pickleball.
Yes, I've given up badminton for pickleball. I've broken my feet enough times that I think pickleball is, people don't know pickleball. A lot of people do, but some people just say pickleball. It's tennis for old people, and it's a lot of fun. And I'm learning how to play sports in a more is Monday, Wednesday, Friday very competitive. Tuesday, Thursday not competitive at all, and just to have fun. And been doing a lot of pickleball. Going to be teaching for Red Cross. Just different activities, and still do volunteer work. I want to do a little bit more with photography than I have. I love photography, but you have to leave. You have to go out and take a picture to really do photography. So there's a little bit of travel. So I don't know what all that's going to hold, but it's kind of a weekly adventure.
Mm-hmm. What surprised you the most about being the VP for Student Affairs at OSU?
Oh, great question. What surprised me the most? I think that surprised me the most. I think the caliber of the students was my biggest surprise. And just an incredible sense of joy working with the students that I've had the opportunity to work with. Thousands. Some of them much more, personally.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the surprise is just, I didn't know what to expect. I'd never even been to Oklahoma before I started my job here, to buy a house. But I didn't know Oklahoma at all. And was very surprised. You see the big cross, that you're the buckle of the Bible Belt, you're this, you're that, you're a red state, you have all those images kind of rolling up in your head, the orange, it's just a lot of things, but my expectations, not every day, let me make that clear, but overall, just incredible students was probably, and I'm just the caliber of our students was probably the most amazing thing to me, surprised me the most, and their willingness to get involved in positive things on campus, and just I think, and not every student, and not every day, but the maturity, the level of conscientiousness of the students, it did amaze me, and that absolutely brought me the most joy. There are also those, moments of terror and fear and horrible things, but for the most part, I would say that was the surprise, was just how delightful the students were here. And again, worked in 4 different states and different places, and just was quite amazed. So the level of activism was not as much as I'd like, because I do believe in going out and speaking your mind. So that was a little bit less than I expected. But just the genuine heart of this kind of Midwestern student, I just found absolutely delightful.
So that surprised you the most. Would you say that was also the best part about your job?
Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't every day. I mean, there's some bright lights that are horrible too. But I would say just the opportunity to be able to meet needs, and that emergency fund has made such a difference for our office. What we've been able to do with that, to come in and be able. It's like being a miracle worker in a very small scale. If you don't have gas money, and you live 30 miles away because that's where you have to live, there's the needs that are met by that emergency fund, and just the contact that created for our office. Kids with terminal illnesses, kids with, just fill in the blank, and the blanks are amazing. Mm-hmm. To be able to make a difference, and the approach is, what's going to happen today, and you never know. I mean, there's, again, many good ones, many bad ones, and not just the crises, but just, something horrible is probably going to happen today too. But being able to work with students and meet their needs where they are, whatever it is that they need, to the extent that you can solve it, mediating a dispute, helping them get help for an addiction issue, going to talk to a faculty member, talking to a police officer. I mean, whatever it is, just trying to make a difference in that student's life.
Mm-hmm.
And there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And and I don't remember all the faces. I don't remember all the needs. Remember some of them clearly, but others are just kind of a blur. But it's a happy blur that we were able to meet those needs or do something. And I would say that probably every BP worth their salt has that. That's probably number one for them. Is today we met this need for this student who was sitting across from me and needed help desperately. That's a wonderful feeling.
Mm-hmm.
That I miss. That I miss.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can still do stuff we can still do things, positive things, but that I miss is the mystery that each day held. You know what's on the schedule? Rarely worked out that way. You get a call, you have a parent call, you have a kid call, you have a faculty call, something has happened, and that happened almost every day. It's not what's written, it's what's really happening in your world. And to hopefully build enough rapport and relationships with students that people would say, hey, you need to go over and see Lee Bird, whatever the mystery is, you need to go over and talk to her about leaving school, doing whatever. And in many cases, we were able to help somebody stay in school, or keep up the fight, or learn how to study, or learn how to de-stress, or learn how to get off the drugs, or learn how to maybe not use as much alcohol. So those things that's the best. And but I just love the students here from day one, and I just have found them delightful, and that, my opinion, has not changed. Clay Beatles would have been another student I would have mentioned in that Matt Byer, Chris Parker. Great kid, getting ready to go to med school as well, and just earnest, really good people, and what fun it has been, and what a privilege it has been getting to know them. You know a lot of students pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Lena, Crane, the other one. So there's just so many good kids.
Are there any topics that I haven't brought up that you would like to include in our interview?
I don't think so. We've had a lot of turf.
Mm-hmm, we did.
Yeah. Greatest profession in the world if a strong constitution is the best. It's not made for everybody. It really isn't. But what a privilege it's been to do this and do it here. Because I think this has been my favorite post. I've been the senior student affairs officer at 3 places, and this has been my favorite. And I'm really blessed. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think you've hit a lot of turf, and I can't think of anything that I really wanted to share that I didn't have the opportunity to share. But yeah.
Are there any topics that you would like to return to and clarify or say anything else about?
I don't think so. I think we're good.
Okay. Well, I think we did cover a lot of turf with this. Look forward to seeing ways that people might be able to use this interview.